In 1972 to 1973, I studied at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. It was my freshman year of college, though a junior year abroad, a year of great experiences for me. And I remember the last morning as the taxi came to take me to the airport. I had stayed up all night with a woman friend, and we had a long, passionate kiss goodbye. And as I got in the cab and we were driving out, leaving Jerusalem, Mount Scopus, where I had spent the year, were as if the hills were resting on clouds. And because it was dawn, the clouds were lit up by the morning sky. And I began to tear. And the taxi driver said to me in Hebrew, "Al titragesh, tachzor." Don't be so emotional. You'll come back. And I knew he was thinking that I was tearing up over the woman friend I had just left. He had seen us kiss goodbye. But indeed, in that moment, I remained silent. I didn't answer him because I was tearing up over Jerusalem. I had fallen in love that year with Jerusalem. Our sacred texts distinctly refer to Israel and Jerusalem in particular in human romantic terms. Ha'ir yoshevet boded. She, Jerusalem, sits alone. So we read in the book of Lamentations. And indeed, my own relationship with Jerusalem and with Israel is more than just a place. It's a romance. It's a romance that's, like all romance, hard to fully explain. It's due in part to growing up and having my mother sing me lullabies, home again in Israel. She who could not help but sing the Hatikvah without crying as a Holocaust survivor. It was my summer in 1970 with my older brother Mark, working on a kibbutz, in the days in which the ideals of Israel were reflected in the kibbutz, in which we two boys who had grown up in the farm area of Phoenix defied the local kibbutzniks who tried to torture us by being able to get up at 3:30 in the morning to take chickens and put them in crates for market, or climb palm trees in the heat of the day because we were from Phoenix and heat was familiar to us. But it was more. Living in Israel is to walk streets that resonate with voices calling us, of memories of the past, of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, of those who were pilgrims through the years, who would go to the Kotel in Jerusalem and cry. Hence the others refer to the walls of the outside of the temple as the Wailing Wall. For when they came as pilgrims across time to those walls, they expressed yearning, a yearning that we will chant at the end of our Yom Kippur tonight, L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, because we as an extended family always saw Israel as our homeland, our roots, but more a yearning to be ingathered, to be one, to have our dignity as a people who's able to determine for ourselves our destiny reclaimed. And in that year from 72 to 73, those were the years in which, in the aftermath of 1967 and the reunification of Jerusalem, there was a sense of the Jewish people's triumph, its strength, and the promise of peace. For in 1967, land was captured from the Egyptians, from the Jordanians, from the Syrians. That was a chip that we might use to enable a future in which we were whole. 1973 was the 25th anniversary of Israel. 25 years, a young country. In 1973 still, if you wanted a telephone, you'd have to wait 2 or 3 years, unless you had protexia, Hebrew word I learned quickly, which meant connections or paid a little under the table. In 1973, there was only one TV station, that's all Ben Gurion wanted, controlled by the government. It was a small place, a poor country. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently came to the UN. On the way, he stopped in Argentina. When he stopped in Argentina on the way, he was greeted as a dignitary by the country of Argentina, by the president. Israel today is a place that the Prime Minister of India, Modi, comes to visit and spend time and be greeted by the leadership of the Jewish homeland. Wow. Wow. This next year will be the 70th anniversary of Israel. From 25 years to 70 years. Today, when we turn on our television, we can watch Israeli TV here as popular cable television. Today, when we watch Israel, we see a nation that has among the most startups in the world and an economy that makes an impact far and wide. Israel today is not a little poor country. It is a little strong country. It is a strong country. Its economy has grown like a miracle. Every year, we here in Orange County are privileged to have through the Raj Center Israelis who come in groups to be exposed to business, the business of America and the business of the world. These groups, these cadres, are usually about 20 people, and they are chosen among many applicants for 2 weeks of learning how to do business in America. They're usually startups of different kinds. It can be startups of computer security, computer fill in the blank, medical technology. This last year, for the first time, they brought in a group of food people, because Israel is also doing very creative things in regard to distributing and the sale of food around the world. When these groups come, they're very diverse, both in age, the kinds of companies that they are, and even sometimes their participants, religious and non-religious. The group that came recently in food had 2 Muslims as part of that group as well. I recently sat down with the head of the Raj Center, Yishai Isaac, who manages that coming together. And he shared that for the Israelis, for many of them, because these are startups that he's trying to bring to America to learn about how funding works, to meet and gain a sense of how stock market in America works. So he said that when they come, many of them come surprised by what they find in America. First of all, they're surprised by the warm welcome. They expect it on some level, but that they're greeted as extended family by the Jews of America. For many, it's their first trip. And it takes for some of them time to feel the feeling of extended family that is part of being an Israeli visiting America. For many of them, I won't look for notes. It just goes to show, because I kind of take pride in being able to flow with a sermon. But I do, when I talk about Israel, get emotional. And all the more when I talk and begin to pause to acknowledge the divide between Israelis and Americans, my mind goes a little blank. Because there are those divisions as well when they come to America. Yes, on some abstract level, it's extended family, but on others, it's a different language. It's a different people. In many ways, Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews, when they come to America, find that they have literally a common language of Hebrew, common foods, and we are, if you will, the foreigners in what is most familiar to them. And so when they come as part of the gathering that is sponsored, they also are a bit at times at an arm's length, aware of how much they have in common with each other. That's often not our basic assumptions. Israel unites and in many ways divides us. It unites us as Jews in that we know that when times were tough, we needed a land, and that we were able as a people to literally rise from the ashes and create a country that indeed has become a country in which a head of state can travel the world, and not everywhere, but widely and more, year after year, be welcomed as a head of state. And now I cross a line. I cross a line from acknowledging our love of Israel and saying how much we have in common, and how we Jews, wherever we live, whether born Jewish or Jews by birth, have a homeland that gives us dignity and pride and belonging that we never have. But the line is to say that it's not always clear what Israel's security means. For some, and understandably, Israel's security means physical survival, and Israel is always under threat. It can change tomorrow in this dangerous world in which we live. And there are some for whom all that matters is Israel's security. But there are others who say, and it's also for some an expression of love, that security is not just what arms provide. Security is your sense of purpose and place. And that creates a tension, and in some cases, a divide among Jews. Can you even discuss the nature of Israel as a nation state and its priorities? I pride myself on speaking without notes. I think because Israel is such an emotional topic, I pause. I pause to bring to mind the great privilege that we had recently of having a guest here on the bima of Dennis Ross. Dennis Ross has been involved his whole adult life on trying to help achieve security for the state of Israel. He has done so as a U.S. citizen. He has done so as a third-party negotiator. Beginning already in the Reagan administration, Dennis Ross joined the State Department. And throughout all the administrations except President Bush #2, he was the key negotiator between Israel and her neighbors. And here on the bima just a week ago, Dennis Ross shared his own life journey and his own experiences as the key negotiator. I asked him a week, just this last Sunday night, what was the closest Israel ever got to negotiating the peace? And he shared that it was that moment during the Clinton administration after Camp David had fallen apart, where they had a thought and a hope that they could bring the two parties together. But he, Dennis Ross, was skeptical about the sincerity of Yasser Arafat to work a deal. He pointed out that Yasser Arafat's keffiyeh was in the shape of the whole of the state of Israel. He wore it as a symbol of his representation, but more, he couldn't let go of the image of reclaiming the whole. And so, although things looked like they were close, they fell apart. And likewise, in his negotiations with Mahmoud Abbas, there were times, most recently under President Obama, where Dennis Ross was the man doing the back-channel secret negotiations for 2.5 years. But those negotiations fell apart. For as he explained, the Palestinians were not prepared to reach a settlement. But he too would say that the future is not about pointing fingers, because that will not allow the next Palestinian leader to move forward. Because he believes, as he shared here, that the future of Israel requires 2 states for 2 people. And how that will come about is not clear, but it is the only way forward, he would say, and I would agree. For if Israel holds on to all the land, it becomes and remains an occupier of millions. And Israel's own sense of purpose, its own sense of holiness, are torn asunder. How that peace will occur is not clear today. Things are at a standstill. He himself, who negotiated his adult life up to 2 years ago, says right now it is frozen and there is no deal to be made yet, unless things slowly begin to roll forward. Then settlements will make that future undoable. There are those who believe that all the land is ours. It says so in the Bible. And it's true. That is the messianic future. But in this world, at this time, to say there is no other people there is to ignore the possibility of living with dignity side by side in a democracy. And so Israel is at a stalemate, and yet it has no other alternative but to live with hatikva, with hope, a hope that must encompass the possibilities of dignity for 2 people. For without that, it will be continued war. Is it possible? It's always possible. No one would believe that the Jews would return to this land after 2,000 years of exile. Was that impossible? Maybe unprecedented, but it clearly is reality. There are those who would shun peace, negotiation, as a fool's errand. And they were those who said that of Jews who spoke of returning to the land of Israel. But we are a people of dignity, and as a people of dignity who need to know that all peoples, even enemies, can one day become neighbors. And it's Im tirtzu ein zo agada, Herzl said, if you have a will, there is a way. That's not only true for Zionism, it's true for the possibility of an Israel that lives side by side in peace with its neighbors. For those who would say, but they are different. That's what they said about us. And that's what people have often said in the midst of conflict. But for we Jews to be fully God's people, for we Jews to know that those words we chanted of Isaiah are words for us too, means to live with the opportunity to enable peace. Remember those words of Isaiah, is this the fast I ask of you? It is to take care of the homeless. We are not a weak people today. We are strong. Israel is strong, and that is an uncomfortable reality. It's easy to be idealistic when you are weak. It's harder when you are strong, and we are now strong. And so, Linda and I are off to Israel. We'll see how strong we are, both personally and as a nation. For that's our privilege. And we leave on Monday already, Monday evening. It's not that we're in such a hurry to leave. It's because we want to be in Israel for Sukkot, which is Wednesday night. And in order to get there with the time difference, leaving Monday night means we get in late Tuesday night. So we're off. And it feels right to be going as we begin our sabbatical, marking my privileged 30 years here at Congregation B'nai Israel. Can you believe that? 30 years. So we begin our sabbatical in Israel because it feels right. It feels to go to Israel as the privilege that our prayers today speak of. Today we gather here, and we are Jews living a full Jewish life, but in part our rich Jewish life is because of the dignity that comes with a state of Israel. And the privilege to travel there to begin our sabbatical, to share Sukkot, where you walk the streets of Jerusalem and you see people carrying their lulavs and etrogs. As you walk at night through the streets and you hear people singing together, that is the fulfillment of a dream, a promise, but it is not yet complete. When we sing L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, we add a word. Next year in Jerusalem, Habnuya, the rebuilt. And it's rebuilt not just physically. And today there's taller buildings than there have ever been in history. It's rebuilt and will be rebuilt when there is indeed not only our inner strength, but the ability to breathe out with neighbors with whom we live. Some would say a tall tale. That's what they said about returning to the land. Not everybody has the same disposition. I only ask that we respect each other in knowing that how we see the dream fulfilled may differ. For some, the great danger is physical survival. Some have the memory of the Holocaust. And for those, understandably, and I say respectfully, the only issue is Israel's survival. But for many of us, Israel's survival has been part of our life, our whole life. And Israel is strong. And the question is, what kind of Israel? Will it be an Israel that treats its American Jews as partners or not? For Yishai Isaac, the head of Mirage Fellow Institute, says, I said, when the fellows come, what do they think about us American Jews? He said the first thing is they're surprised by the feeling of warmth, by the sense of being an extended family. And that's one reason the Raj Center brings them, so that we can bond with each other. But he says, you know what most surprises them? How black and white, how poster-like we talk about Israel. That in America, Jews think they know it all. And they know if it's to remain strong or it's to open its doors to a two-state solution. There's no, he said often, for the Mirage Fellows, what surprises him is how in Israel there are conversations between right and left and center. They may not agree. But in America, all too often, we lack that confidence, the confidence that we both love each other even when we differ as to what the Jewish state should look like. And so on this holy day, we as American Jews live with dignity and strength because there is a land of Israel. And at the same time, the people in the land of Israel have a quality of security that they could not have achieved because there are American and English and French and German Jews who also see Israel as a homeland. And so on this Yom Kippur, we raise money. That's what we Jews do. We raise money because money expresses what's important to us. But one word before I talk about the giving of funds. It's about the sharing with each other and with our families why Israel matters to us. For me, there are two reasons: place and purpose. In Israel, I feel at home. I feel at home because I've been raised that it is my home. I know that it's a nation that if I wanted to, I could declare myself a citizen. It's a home in that the rhythms of the calendar year are Jewish. On a day like this, not only in Jerusalem, but in Haifa or Tel Aviv, you can ride your bicycle down the middle of the street because it's a day in which people collectively are gathered together, knowing that it is a holy day. There's a sense of being part of an extended family, whether born Jewish or having chosen to be Jewish, whether married into the family or born to the family. It feels like family, and it's a culture in which people are prioritized more than any other place I have been to or lived. It's home and its purpose. It's the purpose that we as a people can make a difference in the world, that we as a people can indeed be on the cutting edge of high technology and a place that welcomes the stranger. And so Israel is home. How can we contribute to Israel? We buy Israel bonds. Israel doesn't need our money, full stop. It doesn't. Israel can borrow. It does not need our Israel bond money. I still want you to buy Israel bonds. That's not a reason. It doesn't. It has good credit ratings. Israel has good credit ratings. Like every country, it can borrow money. We buy Israel bonds, one, because frankly, Israel bonds pay pretty well right now. Better than local bonds. But that's not why we buy Israel bonds. We buy Israel bonds because we as American Jews see Israel as homeland, and we want to feel we make a difference partnering. We help pay for infrastructure. We help pay for the kinds of roads that Michael and Sharon Schneider are helping build. For that money to be there, the Israel bonds matter. And so we live in partnership. When we buy Israel bonds, we are making sure that Israel remains strong. Im kemach ein Torah, the rabbis teach. If there is no flour, there is no Torah. But more is needed. For Israel, security is not just her body. It's also her spirit. And I think this will become a bigger and bigger issue, clearly for our children and for their children. For they don't fear for Israel's safety in the same way. Yes, Israel has dangerous neighbors, and it can never let its guard down. But its spirit is the spirit that will allow for the kind of service we are now sharing in this moment, where men and women can pray together, where men and women can go to the Wailing Wall and pray together. And so some would say, but why? What's such a big deal over this wall? It's a wall. You know that joke? The one where the person keeps praying at the kotel and he says to his wife, I keep praying, but nothing seems to change. There isn't the peace I'm praying for. To which he says, well, stop talking to a wall. It could have been flipped. But there is a problem at the wall. And the problem was in the year 2013, the Supreme Court of Israel said that men and women in their respective Orthodox synagogue sides at the wall each have a right to pray and to read Torah. For the Orthodox rabbi who controls the Western Wall praying area said women's voices shouldn't carry to the men's side because that's sexually distracting, and have no business touching the Torah. And they would take the Torahs away when they would try to bring them in. So the Supreme Court said that that's not permitted in a democratic state. And so negotiations began over several years. And in those negotiations, there's a place, not the Western Wall that's most well known, but further along the wall called Robinson's Arch, where an agreement was reached that with Natan Sharansky as the key negotiator, that would be called the Ezrat Yisrael, the Israel section, where egalitarian prayers could take place. And in the plans that were being formulated, and we had Sharansky here in our congregation just a few years ago, it was his goal to create a quality of equality, that when you came to the Kotel, you could go to the egalitarian section or to the Orthodox section, and both would feel significant. Well, just about a month ago, the current government in Israel, under pressure from the ultra-Orthodox, said, no more deal on the egalitarian section. And he thought, Prime Minister Netanyahu thought it might just blow over. Instead, he received crisis response from the American Jewish community. The head of AIPAC flew the next day to Israel for an emergency meeting. One prominent donor, who had just bought $1 million worth of Israel bonds, reneged. And Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who's the head of the Reform Movement, who grew up in Tustin, said, this is about those who stand up and fight against Israel's legitimization on university campuses and at Capitol Hill. You cannot delegitimize the majority of American Jews, then say, can you help us out here? Admittedly, most Israelis don't get the consternation. They don't pray at all. Or if they do, they don't feel a need to pray at the Kotel. Although in a recent survey, 2/3 of Israelis felt that it was wrong for the government to renege on the egalitarian section. And so there's a second thing besides buying Israel bonds, which I support doing, and that is making a donation to the Masorti Movement. For those Jews who live in Israel who want to pray the way we are praying today, with men and women chanting side by side, with a woman leading the congregation in prayer and uplifting our souls, we have the opportunity to give to the Masorti Movement, the conservative movement in Israel. I support the Reform Movement and all kinds of pluralism in Israel. That is our opportunity to invest in the kind of Israel we want to see, so that we will feel at home. In that regard, those Mirage Fellows who come to America are surprised by what they find: a vibrant, choosing Jewish community. In Israel, you don't have to choose it. It's part of your life. It's the rhythm. You can ride the bicycle on Yom Kippur and never park it at a synagogue, because the rhythms of where you live are Jewish. We have to choose it. And we need the partnership of birthright in reverse. That's what Mirage does, and that is what the Re'ut Institute seeks to do with its most recent program called Nation State, and that's to bring more Israelis to meet American Jews so they can indeed have respect for us rather than the caricatures of us. We are caricatured in Israel. Know that that's reality. Just like we caricature Israel, American Jews are caricatured. And the caricature is what we care about in America is work, wealth, and power. That we are superficial as people. That is the caricature. And when they come to America, and this is what Yishai Isaac shared with me from the Mirage Institute, they're surprised to find that we're actually multifaceted and that we care about Israel because we care about our identity and we care about our values. And so support for Israelis coming to America is as important as our going there. One last thing, and that is, if you care about Israel, continue to care about Judaism. Because Israel only matters to the degree to which being Jewish matters. And that means observing Shabbat. It means picking one mitzvah that you care about. It might be helping non-Jewish homeless, but doing so as a Jew, knowing that that's part of Tikkun Olam, helping fix the world, and doing it with the spirit of Jewish belonging is what you can do for Israel at its core. It's about strengthening our identity as Jews. Linda and I leave, as I mentioned, on Monday night. When I go to Israel, I always feel at home and troubled. That's true about being home and lots of times. Because what happens in Israel matters. It's an extension of us. In Israel, when I see people misbehaving, it bothers me because we shouldn't behave that way to each other. And that includes how we treat non-Jewish neighbors. Ribono Shalom, Master of the Universe, I have given many sermons in my 30 years. This one probably deviates more than what I wrote than any I've given. It's probably because when I talk about Israel, somehow I get emotional. For I deeply love Israel. It is the homeland that our people sought. And now we have the privilege to walk her streets and to help build her economy. And yet that promise is so yet incomplete. For our prayers are prayers of peace. And we in this room may differ on Israel's needed security, her physical endangerment and her spiritual endangerment. But know that it is body and soul that create shalom, wholeness. Ribono Shel Haolam, may Israel grow from strength to strength, both physically and spiritually. It has sought peace. Let our college students know what Dennis Ross shared on this bima. The Palestinians were not prepared to sign on the line. Israel was willing to give up land for peace. But let us not become bitter and cynical and condemn a people because of a leadership that failed. Heaven knows our leadership too could have been wiser. May we support Israel, but we do so knowing that Yerushalayim Shalamala, that Jerusalem above, and Yerushalayim Shalmata, Jerusalem as it is in reality, are still far apart. It is messianic for the two to be united as one, but it is our duty to be God's partners in creating that messianic era. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, May we love each other here in this room, despite our differences in how we love Israel. And may we know that to love you, God, is to love all your creatures, and to do so as a light unto the nations. May we so shine brightly. Amen.